Live from the bridge at the Launchpad Studios in Huntington, New York, it's Sports Talk New York with your hosts, Mark Rosenman and AJ Carter. Sports Talk New York is sponsored in part by Cardboard Memories, Clearview, Long Island, the law firm of Decolator, Cohen, and DePrisco, the Phoenix Tube Company, PIMS Incorporated, fueling brand performance for 30 years, Prince Associates for all your insurance needs, and Soho Table Hockey. Here are your hosts, Mark and AJ.
And good Sunday evening to you. Not Mark and AJ, just Mark and Mike Capice with you this Sunday evening. AJ is driving home from Florida. He'll be back live in the studio. We haven't seen him. I don't even remember when we saw him last. It's got to be about 15, 16 weeks ago. You know, I know he was rehearsing for the Masked Dancer and Masked Singer.
I can't wait to see the results.
Yeah, me too. We're looking forward to seeing that for sure. But if you are a longtime fan of the show, you know we started off each and every week with the Cardboard Memories Major League Baseball Report with John Coppinger. Obviously, it's sponsored by Cardboard Memories, which is one of Long Island's most reputable memorabilia retail stores for over 29 years. The owner of Cardboard Memories, Scott Stamell, is known for his knowledge and savvy of authentic autographs. He's been featured on HBO's Real Sports with Brian Gumbel. Cardboard Memories possesses the honesty and integrity one would want and need from a memorabilia source. Scott personally works with each customer to ensure they understand the authenticity of each item. Every piece of autographed memorabilia is purchased directly from the source. Let Cardboard Memories run your next charity fundraising auction. Call them to find out how they can help your organization at no cost. Cardboard Memories is located at 6401 Jericho Turnpike, Comac, New York. Visit them on the web, cardboardmemories.com, or follow them on Facebook or Instagram. All right, John, let's start with all right. Yeah, I don't even know where we should start. Let's start with the New York Mets and a great win today. But more importantly, I think maybe, you know, as the term goes, the worm has turned. I think yesterday, I was driving home and I'm listening to the game on the radio, kind of missing, you know, Howie Rose, obviously, but Ed Coleman does a great job. And Wayne Randazzo is like just jinxing the crap out of Jacob deGrom, saying, you know, Tom Seaver, this day, blah, 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 as he's at number 6. And as he gets closer and closer, Jacob deGrom trying to, you know, and it'd be so good for Jacob deGrom to add, you know, Tom Seaver. I'm going, just shut up, Wayne. And of course, the wheels fall off on the 10th batter, you know, and McNeil makes the error. And before you turn around, the 1-0 lead is 3-1. I'm going, and I am using I made Jim Eisenreich with his Tourette's look like a G-rated movie in the Disney vein. I think I might have used curses that haven't even been invented yet. I was so pissed off. But then that next inning, you just felt it coming, like they're finally going to do this for Jacob deGrom. And I think it is a huge monkey off of the team's back. And I think it was one of those really, really good feel-good wins, obviously tempered by the really bad feeling in the second game. But I think it was, you know, they proved to themselves that, you know, maybe it's not a foregone conclusion that Jake's going to pitch a gem, you know, 14 strikeouts, no earned runs, and get a loss, and they got to win. What did you feel about that performance yesterday?
Well, to be fair, the TV guys were doing the same thing. They were talking after 9 strikeouts. They were talking about Jacob deGrom and being an inner circle Hall of Famer, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And Gary Cohen's good at shooting clowns also. But I agree with you. I thought if they had lost that game for deGrom, that would have been the most. And there've been so many examples of deGrom not getting wins that he should have, and I think that would have been the worst on a day like that where he manages his career high in strikeouts in 6 innings, and they don't score for him in Colorado. I thought that would have been the worst. I thought it would have been demoralizing, and it would have made the second loss, the loss in game 2, a lot worse. But they came back and they got that win. They hit Bart hard, and you couple that with today's win and the way that game ended. You're looking. You look at this team as having something rolling here. They've got some good vibes going, and they're going to hope to keep that up. And hopefully it doesn't snow too hard in Chicago, because the forecast calls for snow on Tuesday. But they got a chance to keep this going.
Absolutely, and I think these rainouts that are going to start translating into double headers of 7 innings, And they're going to be, a lot of them rescheduled in the month of June, when you're going to have Carrasco and Thor back, is only a positive for the Mets. I kind of like the fact that their Met pitchers aren't going to have to go out in the cold and damp weather of April, and they're going to be with their full complement of pitching when these are 7-inning doubleheaders. I just think it's a win-win for the Mets at this point, and so far, so good. Something that wasn't so good, but actually was, to me, an absolute non-story. And listen, I am not part of the quote-unquote cancel culture, but I guess this week I was, because I actually canceled my subscription to The Athletic. The Athletic has been doing this thing lately where they're hiding certain stories. I am a subscriber, so I get them anyway. But they've been almost like the clickbait. All of a sudden, they start putting out these articles that you can only get if you subscribe or buy the article for $1. So the headline of Katie Stragg's article the other day was "Inside the Toxic Met Environment," and it kind of made it seem like the Mets environment is still the same as it was, and they kind of went after Sandy. But basically, after you read the article, it's about this one guy who's no longer there, okay, and didn't do anything to rise to the level of Mickey Callaway or Jared Porter or the hitting coach Ryan. Why am I forgetting his last name? Ellis. Granted, it was a little creepy, but it never rose to that level. And then the second part of the article, they lump in David Newman, who basically, if you read the article, seemed like he might have been a bad boss to 2 or 3 people. I would love to go in and interview every female employee of The Athletic and ask if at any given time their boss bothered them. Because basically the article said that this woman, David did not like us chewing gum. And if I ever heard his footsteps and I was chewing gum, I'd swallow my gum. Really? That's what you're equating to what Mickey Callaway and everyone did? It was just a hit piece that had nothing to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was certainly salacious, and there were things in the article that were definitely troublesome. I thought, listen, the most troublesome thing about that article to me, in terms of what was in it, was the HR person. With the HR person not defending her employees, and it's troublesome because that's the way a lot of HR a lot of HR departments work. That they project the people above them and not the people below them. So that was the thing that got to me. I want to see what comes of this now. I think that's the next question. You got David Sampson on CBSSports.com saying that this is going to spell the end of Sandy's career because of the language he used in the article. That's what I want to know now. What's going to come next? Is this going to die down, and is everybody's job going to be saved, or is Sandy going to pay for it with his job? Remember, Mickey Callaway did a lot worse, and he's still employed. Right. So.
Right. And listen,
we'll see.
And Mickey's, Sandy's language, listen, some of the things they point out, and obviously, listen, there are 2 sides of every story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. Okay. So you want to play devil's advocate. So this one, and the article starts off saying that, listen, everyone knew that Newman was like a horrible boss, but he also looked out for his employees and realized if there was a certain, ceiling that they were hit, that he would look out for them to find other jobs for them. So I think he was somewhat, listen, his personality might have been off-putting to some, but I think in his heart, he looked out for his employees. And so if he's the head of the Mets, brand or a brand ambassador, and whether it's a man or a woman is looking unkempt, it's kind of his responsibility to say something. I don't know if that's sexist. I don't know if he said something to a male employee whose beard might have been unkempt and said something, but they don't take offense to it, as opposed to a woman's hair was unkempt. He had a review of an employee and kind of said something like, and it was a troublesome pregnancy, and said, you were a much better worker prior to the pregnancy. Now, he shouldn't have used that language. He didn't have to use that language, but I think maybe because he felt he was close enough to the person that he was honest with her and whatever, but he should have never said that. So when you go to human resources with that, what Sandy says, does that rise to the level of execution? And I don't believe it does. He misspoke. It was stupid. He was probably called in. He was probably told about it. I cannot see this to me, if Sandy gets fired, is a total overreaction to an article that already, I think most people, interestingly enough, The Athletic turned off their comments on the article. And even more interestingly enough, if you go and look at, afterwards, you click on why, their terms and conditions of turning off their comments on certain articles. I mean, this is supposed to be a reputable paper, and the first comment when you look at the FAQs about comments were no a-holes, but the whole word written out. To me, that totally takes away all your credibility. That to me is a total non-starter, and it was a reason why I can't. If I can't comment in that on that article, why is it there? Why is there a comment section? So for me, that was the instant that I just said, you know what? I love Rick Carpinello. I love some of the baseball beat writers on it, but to me, that was a hit piece, and it was the end for me.
Well, I'll say that if it was a hit piece, and I think the reaction will bear that out that it was a hit piece. If Steve Cohen, let's see what Steve Cohen thinks. If he thinks it was a hit piece, then we're going to find out, because it'll be either it's going to die out, or Sandy's going to get fired. And I'm very interested to see what happens. I think the comments were even turned off from the very beginning, because I looked at that article fairly quickly, and after it came out, it was on Friday, and I was on the bus looking at that, and there were no comments even then. So it was fairly early on that they shut off the comments. So I wonder if they did that from the very beginning.
No, there were some, and they were actually trending negative against the article, actually. And that's why I think they turned it off. All right, Johnny, we'll speak to you next week. John Coppinger heard here each and every week with the Cardboard Memories Major League Baseball report. Take a quick break. On the other side, one of our favorite authors, a friend of the show, Erik Sherman, joins us to talk about his great new book. Keep it tuned right here.
Do you own a business? When is the last time you actually had a visit from or even spoke with your insurance representative? Did your current insurance agency sell to another firm or maybe merge, leaving you without the attention you deserve? Prince Associates is a provider of commercial insurance nationwide and represents some of the finest insurance carriers in the industry. Prince Associates has been representing commercial clients since 1965, and we continue to grow and offer our personal services in a competitive and ever-changing market. If you want back the insurance relationship you deserve, reach out to us, 516-822-6550. That's area code 516-822-6550. And ask for Leith or Craig, or find us on the web at www.princeins.com.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York. Mark Rosenman with you this Sunday evening. Joining us now is a good friend of the show, frequent guest as well, prolific writer. He's the author of the critically acclaimed Kings of Queens, Life Beyond Baseball with the 86 Mets. Also co-author of the highly acclaimed baseball autobiographies Out at Home with Glenn Burke, A Pirate for Life with Steve Blass, the New York Times bestseller Mookie, A Life in Baseball and in the 86 Mets, and Davey Johnson, My Wild Ride in Baseball and Beyond. He's an annual lecturer at the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. He co-authored After the Miracle of the Lasting Brotherhood of the 1969 Mets. His latest book, Two Sides of Glory, the 1986 Boston Red Sox, in their own words, features 13 of that team's members of what many consider the best Boston Red Sox team in history, revealing just how much that season means to them all these years later. It is a thrill to welcome back our friend Erik Sherman to Sports Talk New York. Welcome, Erik.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be back.
Your style of books are so interesting. And you start out as a pure autobiographer, as your first three books, as we mentioned, are single subjects: Glenn Burke, Steve Blass, Mookie Wilson. Then you do the King of Queens book about the 86 Mets. You go back to the biography genre with Davey Johnson, and now back-to-back team-centric books. And this team book is the first of the three about a team that didn't win a championship. So can you talk a little bit about your evolution as an author and what drew you to this project, which for me is such a great companion to the King of Queens?
Well, the evolution has been, the first book I wrote with Glenn Burke was back in the mid-'90s, a very different kind of book. Glenn was the first ball player to come out of the closet and basically was blackballed from the game. And then I took a long break between books and wrote a book with Steve Blass, a pitcher who had it all, one of the best pitchers in the game. And then overnight, what is now called Steve Blass disease, couldn't throw the ball straight anymore. And then I did the book with Mookie, and that kind of changed everything because I was kind of entering into the world of the 86 Mets. So that book was so well received, and I got to meet a lot of Mookie's teammates. that I decided to do a book, a very personal book, with the key and most intriguing members of the '86 Mets. Turns out it was one of Davey Johnson's favorite books, and he said, "You're the guy to write my autobiography." And then I kind of became known as like the Mets, like one of the Mets authors, along with Matthew Silverman. and my agent said, "How would you like to do a '69 Mets book?" And I said, "Man, there's been like 30 written about that team." And he says, "Well, Art Shamsky wants to do a book on the '69 Mets. So you guys come up with a great angle and make it work." And we did, with the angle being getting a group of the '69 Mets together to go visit Tom Seaver for the last time. And that takes us to this book, which you're right, it's very different. It's similar to Kings of Queens. It's kind of like the companion book to that one. But it's different in that ultimately this team was not victorious. But I thought it would be really intriguing to do an in-depth book and study on a team that experienced the very highest of highs and the very lowest of lows within a 2-week period in October. No team was one strike away from elimination in the ALCS in a Game 5 of the best of 7, and then 12 days later, they're at the other end. They're one strike away from eliminating the other team, in this case the Mets, and they don't close the deal, and then they lose the next night, a couple of nights later. And so what effect that would have on these guys' careers and the rest of their lives. And so I thought that would be a really intriguing story. And it turned out from the interviews, which were highly emotional, I certainly wasn't disappointed.
It's interesting that you said that, because one of the things that kind of intrigued me was one of the guys who seems totally haunted by it is Rich Gedman. And he says there's a pain that he carries. I just would appreciate this game so much more if I hadn't gone through the pains of '86. But then you ask him truly a great question. You ask him, did the losing the way the Red Sox did in the World Series take anything away from the euphoria he felt 2 weeks earlier when they beat the Angels? And his response was unbelievable, but it also got me to thinking that initially when this book came out, when it was called Two Sides of Glory, I kind of thought it was your way of making it the companion to the '86 Mets. But in hearing Gedman's response, I almost think it refers to the high of the Angel series and the low of the Mets series. So am I correct in that?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the highest of highs with the Angels. I mean, Donnie Moore on the mound, was just overpowering against Dave Henderson. Henderson looked lost. It really looked, and this would have ended the series with the Angels, and he just looked like an old man. He was hobbling. Everyone talks about Buckner, but Dave Henderson was playing hurt, and it was miraculous that he reached out and was able to drive the pitch that he did. I mean, it was very similar to Kirk Gibson's shot in '88, if you think about it. And from there, then the Angels, then they tie it. People forget this. Right. Then they tie it, goes into extra innings, and then Henderson has the sac fly in extra innings, and they go back to Boston. And the Red Sox knew that they were in the driver's seat and that there was no way that they would lose a game back in Boston.
So I'm going to jump around for a few of the chapters and some of the personalities in the book. You start the Dwight Evans chapter with a sentiment I'm sure that so many people feel when we look at athletes. You state, conventional wisdom has it that professional baseball players live a life of fortune and fame and are generally immune to the common and sometimes extraordinary struggles that beset the average person. You look at the era in which Dewey played, which was way before every athlete was on social media sharing their personal lives, and that only enforces that statement for me. But Dwight was struggling with 2 children at home who had medical issues, and he'd even let his teammates know about it. Can you share how hard it was for him to play night in and night out, and why he chose to keep it private?
Well, he didn't want it to be a distraction, and It seemed to me so. Dwight Evans had 3 children: a daughter who was perfectly healthy, and 2 sons, which is commonly referred to as elephant man's disease. It's NF, neurofibrosis, and I think I have that right. But anyway, what they had was commonly known as elephant man's disease. The one son I know had over 40 surgeries. I mean, it was just horrific for most of Dwight Evans' career. He, was leaving hospitals. He was leaving his kids after they had surgery, and would go straight to the ballpark. Sleepless nights, and it seems to me that for as much as that obviously would affect him, he also rallied around that. Mark, it's so incredible, but I went to Ted Williams' baseball camp when I was 16. It's a camp up in Massachusetts, and we had a field trip to Fenway Park one night. And that night, Dwight Evans hit 2 home runs. Now, little did I know, it was 1982. Little did I know that, 3 decades, more than 3 decades later, I'd be sitting in Fenway Park with Dwight Evans talking about that game. Well, that game, before he went to the ballpark, was one of these instances when he was in the hospital with one of his sons, and his son, like right out of, the pride of the Yankees with Lou Gehrig, he promises his son that, yeah, I'll hit 2 home runs for you tonight. And he goes out and he does it. And it wasn't the only time that Dwight did that for one of his sons, and also for at least one other child that he visited in the hospital while he was visiting his kids. So he used that, I believe, as a mechanism to really concentrate on his game. But it's right out of Hollywood. It's incredible.
Right. That struck me as incredible as I was reading that chapter, that there wasn't just one Babe Ruth story. There were actually 3. And the fact on August 30th, 1982, you happened to be there for the time he hit 2 home runs for Tim was phenomenal. But the other one that you mentioned even had a great postscript to it. So the one you alluded to, the person in the hospital, I believe his name was Dan, and he was suffering from liver cancer. And, and his prognosis was not good. And, he said, could you hit a home run for me? And he did. But do you remember the postscript to that story, like years later?
Yeah, sure. It was the Red Sox television station, I believe Nesson. They were doing a follow-up story on it, something like 25 years later. And they flew Dwight Evans up from Florida to kind of, sneak up behind the kid while he was on camera. Well, not a kid anymore. He was a grown man who had survived. And Dwight just offered him so much encouragement to live on and get past his ailment. And so all those years later, something like 25 years later, Dwight Evans comes up behind him on camera. And, the young man just broke down and cried. And, he may not have been alive today without the encouragement that Dwight Evans had given to him.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And you make that observation, and it's interesting because there are other mentions in the book about some of the other real life things that, mere mortals face. Bob Stanley's dad, Wade Boggs' dad, Rich Gedgeman's sister and dad all passed away during that 1986 season. And it's a central theme to a lot of your books. And I think that's why they're so successful, as you seem to humanize all of your subject. And I think you might do that more than any other writer that I've read. I'm wondering, is that a skill that you've learned, or is that just something that's in your DNA?
I think it's in my DNA. I just got off a Zoom call with Jeff Pearlman, who wrote the incredible The Bad Guys Won, which was really, I think, it was certainly the first of the 86 Mets books, which, just transcended all the others. And
forever making Rafael Santana a airline favorite.
Yeah, exactly. So Jeff, he admitted, he's like, yeah, I'm more cynical. And, you tend to look at, I don't think he said warm and fuzzy. I think I said that, but he said that he couldn't write a book like I write. And I can't write a book like him. I mean, he is a phenomenal writer. So anyway, what I'm getting at is he would have taken a different approach with the Red Sox book that I wrote. In fact, he had a great title for it. This is what I wanted to get to. He would have entitled the book "The Good Guys Lost" instead of because they were such great guys. They were so unlike. Me. I love the '86 Mets. Some of them have become really good friends of mine, and but the Red Sox, they weren't the hard partying animals that, they didn't have a scum bunch or anything like that. I mean, these were guys that were very involved with the Jimmy Fund, and Jim Rice was rescuing a little kid that got hit with the ball, saved his life, got hit with a ball in the stands, played in a blood-soaked uniform. I mean, these were good human beings.
Right.
And so I just thought that Jeff's title was, if I had to do it all over again, maybe I would have renamed the book. But Two Sides of Glory, I think, really goes to the heart of it. That that ALCS against the Angels and their entire regular season was magical. Magical.
And plus the fact that I really do think it serves two purposes, as I think it's a perfect companion book to the Mets. So it's like that other side of glory in that respect as well. So I think your title is great. No disrespect to Jeff, another one of my favorite writers. But another, thread that comes throughout the book is the absolute love that Red Sox Nation has for their team, but in a very snarky type way. So like, I think the absolute quote that might nail Red Sox Nation perfectly comes from Bob Stanley in the book. And he said that he was by the bullpen and a guy yelled out, "Hey, Stanley, you're worth every penny you make. It's the dollars I'm worried about." So, I mean, it's just, that is a phenomenal quote. But, could you describe, the feeling you got when these guys were talking about the Red Sox fans?
Well, I think they respect the fact that the fans up there truly do live and die with the team, and they always have. But there is a part of the Red Sox fans' DNA, and the media up there certainly contributed to it. More in the '80s, I lived up there in the mid '80s. I went to school up there. I worked up there for a while, and I saw how it almost felt like, not Peter Gammons, but some of the others. It was almost like it was better copy if the Red Sox blew it again. And, they lost in '46 with Ted Williams. They lost in 7 games. They lost in 7 games in '67 to the Cardinals. They lost in 7 games in '75 to the Reds. They blew a 14-game lead to the Yankees in '78. So they always came up short in the end. And there was a part of that DNA that always expected the worst. And what made this team, I think, different was that so they had their big lead at the midway point, but then a guy that gets derided, Calvin Giraldi, comes out of nowhere. They bring him up. He was a starting pitcher in the Mets system. Then he was in the Ojeda trade. Red Sox convert him into a reliever in the minors. He comes up in July when their bullpen, has some injuries, and I mean, he was the talk of the town for 3 months. He had an ERA of 1.4 something, just threw lightning. I mean, they didn't have anything like him in their bullpen, and the city was like, you know what? We're not going to blow this one. We're not going to blow it to the Blue Jays or the Tigers or the Yankees or whoever. It was a good division back then, really good, the best in baseball. And, once they got past the Angels, the Red Sox were, the headline news like every night. And that gets lost. With the Buckner play and Schiraldi and Stanley and McNamara's decisions and all that. And I've always wanted to do a book on this team because I just felt like that got lost and when I did the '86 Mets book, Kings of Queens, I'm like, the other side of the story's got to be told the right way, and so my style, it's to meet with these guys in person, no matter where they're living, so I can read the body language, I can look into their eyes, I can get a good sense of how they're reacting to my questions, so much better than doing it over the phone. And I think that really comes out in the books that I write.
It absolutely does. And on top of that, you add in the fact that, Dewey Evans played in both the 1975 World Series and the '86. He only got to be on, play in the World Series. Obviously, Rice was on there. And that's another story how, 6 games before the season ends, the best player gets hit and is out of the World Series. But when you speak to Rice, and here's the other interesting thing. So, I did a book on a team that also lost, the 1979 Rangers, and for me, had the Rangers never won the Cup in '94, that 1979 team might have been the most beloved team in the history of the franchise. Rice has a very interesting take when he starts talking to you, and he basically goes position by position with the 2004 team. And I found it absolutely incredible when the matchup of the position between Jim Rice and Manny Ramirez comes up. Can you retell that little interaction you had with Jim Rice?
So Jim Rice is one of the most difficult interviews in sports.
Yep.
He's had a combative relationship, especially when he was a player, with reporters, and a couple of times, it got a little physical, and so you have to kind of be careful. And so I was looking for, I had my questions, but I needed to make him feel comfortable with me. So as it turned out, he decides he wants to play a game, and I'm like, this is fine. I went off script with Lenny Dykstra. I went off script a little bit with Oil Cam Boyd. Just making these meetings as natural as possible. I love that. So he wants to play a game. He's like, everyone's talking about these recent world championship teams, and the first one in 2004, everyone's saying what a great team that was. Well, the 75 team was better. Let's go position by position. So I'm like, okay. So, I hesitated first with first base, and he jumped on me. He says, you see, like right away, we had Yastrzemski at first, and then when he got to left field, he's like, everyone's talking about how Manny Ramirez, is better than me. No. And I mean, he really believes that, he was the better player than Manny Ramirez. Now we know now that Manny probably had some help, whereas Rice. I don't even think Jim Rice lifted weights. He was just one of these freakishly strong guys. And kind of like Dave Parker, I understand he didn't really lift weights either. He was just so freaking strong. And so, he felt he was the better player than Ramirez. And maybe he's right. Only one of them's in the Hall of Fame. But man, Ramirez was awfully good.
Yeah, it's also so cool that, obviously, you have tape running and you have hours and hours and hours of stuff to transcribe. And just like the little things you leave in the book, like when you mentioned how, that Jim Rice came up with Fred Lynn, and he went, no. Fred Lynn came up with Jim Rice, things like that. For the people that have not purchased this book, absolutely have to buy it. There's the chapter on Roger Clemens alone, I think. And you mentioned Jeff Pearlman, no disrespect. I believe he did the book on Roger Clemens about the Rocket. I think I found more in this chapter, again, you humanize Roger Clemens, and I enjoyed that chapter. And again, I think you are so adept at picking the right things. Like, so, Roger Clemens mentioned how he was on Don Drysdale's radio show. And I guess in a break, he asked, Don Drysdale asked Roger Clemens what Roger thought Don Drysdale's best pitch was. And Roger didn't know. And, Drysdale said it was his second knockdown pitch. He said, because it showed the other batters that the first one wasn't a mistake.
That's right.
There's just so many great things. So, Erik, first of all, what's up next for you? Because I'm thinking a great thing for you would be like the entire 1969 expansion. I could see you doing a book on those teams, like the 69 Expos and Padres. But what's next for you?
Well, I would love to do a Padre or an Expos book because my two kids go to college up there, and I love the city, and I know that they won a baseball team back up in Montreal in the worst of ways, and I hope they get one. I have just started. I just agreed to a deal with a publisher to write a book on Fernando Valenzuela and his impact on not just Latinos in LA, but Latinos all over the world that never watched baseball before until Fernando came on the scene, and also how he brought the Latinos out to Dodger Stadium because a lot of Chicanos were kicked off their land so they could build Dodger Stadium. And so for 2 decades, the Latino community really, they were not Dodger fans. and Fernando changed all that. And his impact still lives today. So I thought that would be a pretty fascinating story. So but that won't be out for a couple of years. So we'll have some time between now and then.
We will definitely have you on before that for sure. It is always a pleasure. Thanks for your time tonight. More importantly, thanks for all your books. Always great reads, always consistent, always thought-provoking. We really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you too, Mark. You have a great show. Thank you.
Thank you, Erik. Erik Sherman, author of Two Sides of Glory, the 1986 Red Sox in Their Own Words, plus many other great books. Keep it tuned right here. We'll be back with the NHL Report with Russ Cohn right after this.
The Phoenix Tube Company Incorporated is among the country's leading manufacturers of structural ornamental stainless steel tubing, rectangles, squares, and processed flat bars. The company takes pride in its everyday commitment to quality and customer service. The philosophy of the company has been and continues to be to support the growth of the stainless tube market through distribution and service centers throughout the country. Ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing is used for a wide variety of aesthetic and mechanical products where superior finish and corrosion resistance are required. Some products manufactured include tubing for mirror bracket arms, boat rails and ladders, washroom grab bars, swimming pool rail products, medical equipment, automotive step bars and trimming, as well as structural framing for food processing equipment. For a quote or for more information on how the Phoenix Tube Company can meet your ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing needs, visit them on the web at phoenixtube.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-526-2124.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York. Mark Roseman, Mike Capiz with you this Sunday evening. It's time now for the NHL Report with Russ Cohn, sponsored by our friends over at Soho Table Hockey. What's table hockey, you say? You listen to us long enough, you should know that we've all grown up with rod hockey or bubble hockey or even air hockey tables, but Soho Table Hockey is embracing the nostalgia of those old tabletop games, and they designed a whole new board for the future. Handcrafted with designer wood, state-of-the-art playing surface, unbendable rods, energy-absorbing walls. This is a table hockey game that 8 players age 8 to 80 can enjoy. Even better, the exceptional quality and design allows the game to stand up to the intensity of tournaments, which is why Soho Table Hockey is the #1 choice of championship players throughout North America. Visit SohoTableHockey.com, learn more, start your order on a custom game, choose your wood, centerized logo, and even the team matchups. Go ahead, drop the puck. You'll love Soho Table Hockey so much you won't be able to stop playing. And a team that is not stopped playing at all since the trade deadline is the Boston Bruins, and they've looked really, really good. A team that hasn't looked so good since the trading deadline, and that's what I want to ask you about. We'll start there, is the New York Islanders. Listen, I get they wanted, some additional goal scoring because they lost Lee. But you know what? I think they've lost a little bit of the chemistry. I think the young guys brought speed, and that's what made the Islanders so tough. I think Travis Zajac is slowing them down a little bit. Palmieri is not the player he used to be. What are you seeing out of the Islanders? Ranger fans certainly are not happy. They were rooting for them for 2 games, and they didn't come up big in those at all.
I think they're just going through some changes, and I think they have the right guys to play playoff hockey. But as you know, regular season is different. So I think they'll just muddle through the regular season, whether they win the division or the Caps do. I think the Caps may do it. But that's fine. I don't think that really diminishes the Islanders' chances. I just think this is one of those things where they're just trying to find their way. Boston went through it a few weeks ago with all the injuries and everything. Now Rask is back, and you saw that, he made great saves on Ovi and everything else. And even though Jeremy Swayman looks great and half the Boston base would like to see him, it's still Tuukka Rask's team, like
Absolutely.
you said.
Yeah, there's no question. Tuukka played out of his head today, a couple of great saves in that game, in a back-and-forth game. And again, it looks like Boston's finding the ways to win that the Islanders did in the beginning of the season. I agree. But I do believe there is, some cause from concern. Things are coming hard against, the Islanders, say that, but they're close to third place as well. They could actually lose home ice advantage to the Penguins.
They could.
And
they could.
Yeah. So
I don't think anybody in the East is going to not make the playoffs, but I do think you're right in the sense that there's going to be a lot of jostling for playoff position. And yes, the Islanders don't want to lose home ice because I do think you're right, and it makes them more vulnerable.
Yeah. It's all right. Now let's talk about the New York Rangers. Obviously, listen, they did play 4 games against the Devils. They squandered some leads, but they bounced back. They found a way to win. I don't care who you're playing. When you play 4 games straight, it's very difficult to win all 4. They did that. That being said, it's such a weird fan base. Some of us don't think that it is an absolute necessity to make the playoffs this year. I think it's more important that, with 12 games left, a dozen games left in the season, they are still playing meaningful hockey. They're competing. They're young players, which everyone said was a knock on Quinn, weren't getting better. They are getting better. There's no question that Lafreniere is getting better, that Keandre Miller is getting better. But the other thing is now it's like, and granted, they're probably not a playoff team this season, so it's kind of strange to say this, but they have an abundance of riches. I mean, Zach Jones is now training with them. It could be Braden Schneider joins the team at one point if they fall out of it. Lundqvist is coming next year. Where are there enough positions for? I mean, and these are not third pair defensemen we're talking about, even at this young age.
No, I agree. I would still wait another year on Schneider. There is no reason to put him in the NHL. He still needs to get physically stronger for the kind of physical game he plays. Yeah, he's fast, and yes, he scores goals, but he can get points, but he is a physical guy. You don't want to rush him. Jones has had the benefit of playing in college, and he's been getting stronger all along. But yeah, he won't be a top pairing guy in this team, but he might be a number 4. But if he's not a number 4, he'll be a number 5 on a really good defense someday. They do have the riches that way. I think guys are starting to develop better. I liked the play with Kravtsov today. He makes a strong play behind the net defensively, turns around and sort of goes backdoor and gets his first goal. That's a good veteran play. I think they did right by Kravtsov by getting him in there and giving him some action. Lafreniere, that goal was more of what you used to see from Lafreniere in junior hockey. That was a great play by Hedl, but it's a really skilled goal on that backhand play, and then he gets knocked into the net. That's nice to see. If he gets 12 to 15 goals this year, you're happy with his season.
Absolutely.
You can't expect 18-year-olds to score 25 goals in the NHL. It usually doesn't happen. And Panarin right now looks like a top 3 player in the league. And they're making a little push, but you're right. They're at least playing meaningful hockey, and that does help the young guys develop. So I do think Quinn is over the hump that way. I do think it was fair to question him a couple weeks ago, though.
Right. And the other thing before we let you go, first of all, 2 things. Washington Capitals, another player to play his 1,000th game in Nicholas Backstrom. But, there was a stat today that just totally blew my mind. And it was about Patrick Marleau. They said that Patrick Marleau has played with 34% of anyone who's ever played the game of hockey. How is that even possible?
He's the Kevin Bacon of hockey. That's what it really is boiled down to.
6 degrees of Patrick. Yeah, I love it. Oh, it's unbelievable. All right, Russ. We'll speak to you next week. Russ Cohn here each and every week with the Soho Table Hockey NHL Report. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, we'll go from the ice to the hardwood. So keep it tuned right here. If you're a company looking to increase your visibility to make sure your promotional materials get packaged in the most attractive way and distributed most efficiently, then you need to call in PIMS. Whether you're launching a new product and need to assemble customized influencer packages or looking for a more efficient way to manage your inventory and collateral, PIM's involvement helps maximize the impact of your brand's performance. For more than 30 years, PIMS has been helping companies get their message out to the right people, offering personalized distribution services and full-scale inventory management solutions. PIMS works its magic on 3 continents, backed by 350,000 square feet of warehouse space. If you're looking for experience, PIMS is it. They've shipped more than 13 million packages and elevated more than 8,000 brands. Want to know more? Check them out on the web, PIMSinc.com. That's PIMSINC.com, and read testimonials from their satisfied clients. That's PIMS, the first name in marketing support.
Decolator Cohen and DePrisco, LLP, is pleased to introduce their website, policeofficersrighttosue.com, as an educational and informative site designed to instruct members of the law enforcement community of their civil rights in line-of-duty accidents. Many law enforcement members are not aware of their rights to sue and fail to bring lawsuits within a specific time frame, thereby forfeiting their ability to seek rightful compensation against those parties that cause officers to be injured. PoliceofficersRightToSue.com provides successful past results of line-of-duty lawsuits. These examples range from officers being provided with inadequate equipment, RMP accidents, slip and falls, and station house mishaps. If any law enforcement member has a question regarding a potential lawsuit, they can contact DCD at policeofficersrighttosue.com or at 1-800-901-1LAW. That's policeofficersrighttosue.com or 1-800-901-1LAW.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York. Mark Rosenman with you this Sunday evening, headed into the home stretch. But after us, make sure to stay tuned to BT Talks Baseball when his guest today will be the great Colin Cosell and Dave Jordan. So keep it tuned right here as well. It's now time for the NBA report with Chaim Tauber. So Chaim, let's start with the Spurs. And, they're up to their old tricks as the NBA announced that the San Antonio Spurs have been fined $25,000 for violating the league's player resting policy. Violation occurred when the Spurs rested 3 players in a road game against the Phoenix Suns on April 17th. I mean, that rule pretty much was put in because of the Spurs, and yet they continue to do it. Is $25,000 enough to stop them from doing this? Chaim, you there? I guess we lost Chaim. That was weird. Chaim, you there? Okay, we don't have Chaim. Well, so I can tell you, Mike. So, this is something they've done in the past. People buy tickets to see the Stars. The Stars aren't playing. People get, PO'd, and, then $25,000 is a drop in the bucket. Oh, is that Chaim? Chaim, you there? Something wrong with Chaim's phone. All right. You can hang up on Chaim. Obviously, we don't have him. So that's one thing. The other thing that's happening in the NBA is that, one of the records that people felt was unobtainable is Oscar Robertson's 181 lifetime games of having a triple-double. And, Russell Westbrook is only 10 games away from that right now. I don't even know what that equates to in other sports, but it's been a long-standing record. He's only 10 away. He's definitely going to break it. It's one of those unbreakable records that everyone felt would stand forever, but we're going to see a player do it.
I mean, I think it's even crazier that he still has, 8 years left in his career.
Yeah.
He's going to shatter the record.
He's going to totally shatter. And that for sure will become an unbreakable record. But, it kind of says, because if you take, it's interesting because you take a look at how long certain records in whatever sport, whether it be Gretzky's records, whether it be, the Ripken record's never going to be broken. Certain records, obviously, complete games will never be broken now. Even wins, 300 win plateau is never going to be met again. This was a record back in the day, which no one even came close to. It just shows you how great Oscar Robertson actually was, because then you see some of the other players, that came along that are in 160, 150, within the realm, but never, coming close. And for a long time, there was nobody even close. So, it is an interesting record. The Knicks and Nets playing really fabulous basketball right now. The Knicks are fun to watch.
I mean, it's the first time in 10 years.
It really is unbelievable. I mean, in the beginning of the season, and Chaim, it's a shame he's having phone troubles. I mean, he raved about Thibodeau. He wanted Thibodeau years ago, and it's a shame that Phil Jackson couldn't have brought him in when he was here. There was a power struggle, and I don't think Phil wanted him here. And and listen, I don't know if he would have succeeded with the personnel that Phil had given him, but Thibodeau has gotten his team totally bought in, and they're a playoff team.
I mean, I completely agree with that. It's crazy to think that they found their guy. Now they just have to keep building on this, and who knows what they're going to do. They could be one of those sneaky teams in the playoffs now.
And it's amazing because you take a look at the turnover of the Madison Square Garden teams, the Rangers and the Knicks, over the last 3 or 4 years, and for the first time in a long time, both teams seem to be on the upswing, and both teams have a lot of young players like Quickly and some of the other players that you can really get behind, and you could rally around them. And listen, Brooklyn is a phenomenal team, but you know what? As New Yorkers, I think we kind of, well, I shouldn't say that. It's hard. You're a Yankee fan, so back in the day, the Yankees would buy, it's hard to buy a pennant. You still need to get the right people. But I think when you start having your homegrown players and they start succeeding, even with the Yankees when they were great, you had the core four, which came up through the system. They weren't bought. So your Pettits, your Posadas, your Jeter, and your Bernie Williams. As far as the Mets, when Gooden came up and a lot of their players. So I think we like the homegrown a little more than we like the added superstars.
It almost gives it more of a satisfaction thing. We drafted these guys, we developed them into our system, and we didn't need to do anything to acquire them. We trusted them and we believed in them, and here we are now.
Although I think the Met fan base loves Francisco Lindor, so I don't know how much that holds water with that. But yeah, it has been fun with the Knicks playing really good ball. So what we'll do now is going to be the NFL report. So it's going to be time for the Capco NFL report, and that's going to be with Jay Retcher. Even though it is spring, summer's going to be here right before you know it. It's a time to get your windows and doors ready to let that fresh air in, the bugs out with a Clearview retractable screen. The Clearview retractable screen system comes with a lifetime warranty, and it also includes the patented speed reducer so it will not snap back. You get the luxury of a screen door in a sleek, low-profile design without the hassle of a bulky storm door or sliding screen door. Call 631-440-1100 for a free estimate. That's 631-440-1100, or visit them on the web at clearviewlongisland.com. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
What's up, Marco Zibanejad? How are you?
Doing good. I don't know. Maybe you should call me Marker Kratzoff. I don't know. I think that might be my next jersey. I think I'm going to have to invest in a Kratzoff jersey.
He's incredible, man. I've watched every game he's been in, man. He's so responsible defensively.
Yeah,
Rangers got a good one there.
A lot of fun. All right, so let's start off with the fact that the National Football Players Association informed players Saturday night that the NFL doesn't intend to discipline players for high-risk COVID conduct during the offseason, and that those activities such as going to bars, indoor events would fall under that category. So that development means any players that return to the team facilities next week for the in-person off-season workouts won't have to live in quarantine. Last season, the teams and the league fined players for a variety of those off-field conduct violations. And, in fact, former Washington current Steelers quarterback Dwayne Haskins received one of the heavier punishments. I think he was fined somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 and stripped of his captainship. The news comes after, I believe, 18 teams kind of opted out of the voluntary practices. I don't know. Is that, an overreaction? Why would you reduce the restrictions just to get these players back in these voluntary workouts?
Well, I don't know if it's so much that, because from what I'm hearing, eventually I think there's going to be players from every single one of the teams that are going to opt out, because for a long time, even though they're voluntary, before the team would leave, the coaches are giving the kind of that wink and the nod. Yeah, it's voluntary, but you should probably be here. Now guys are exercising that right. Is it a loophole because of the whole COVID thing? Yeah. And the players are exploiting that, especially the veteran players. I think the NFLs and the NFLPA are kind of looking at it and going, listen, the way the legislation is different in every state, added with the, updated vaccines and added with, we've already done an entire season with COVID testing. I think there's there's more transparency now than there was last year where there was so much unknown. So it was like, hey, we don't really know about everything. So everybody just kind of keep it cool. Don't go out. And that's why they look at Haskins like, bro, we didn't know so much about this. We know so much more now than we did last year. That's why I think the NFL and the NFLPA is kind of looking at it and going, all right, we can't really be too stringent because it's different everywhere. So we kind of have to take off and kind of lay back off the reins a little bit here.
It's also interesting that they start curtailing the pad workouts. They started, less exhibition games. And I think what it makes for is the first 3 or 4 games are so sloppy. And I get it, but, I just think it sends the wrong message. I think there should still be penalties. And you're right. There are different jurisdictions, but I think you need to make sure that players, whatever home state they live in, live by the protocols that are set in place. And I think that's where the fine should come in place. If you live in an area where you're still supposed to be masked and you're not supposed to go, in gatherings of large, people, if you start seeing stuff on Instagram of, Paul Pierce type gatherings with no masks, I think that they should be fined.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. I think the NFL and the NFLPA wants to take as much of the legislation part out of it and not have to do it on a case-by-case basis where, hell, New York and Florida are two totally different stages right now of everything that's going on. And, kind of one of the bad things, being down here in Tampa is like the Buccaneers had a brand new offense, a brand new quarterback, so many different players, and they were able to win the Super Bowl without that. So in a way, it almost fed into, well, why do we need the off-season workouts? The Saints are another team that really waited until the very, very end to all meet. And look at them. I mean, I know they went out, in the playoffs, but hell, they won the NFC South. So there's 2 teams right there that, they did things kind of on their own accord and it worked out and it didn't really affect them during the season. So that I'm sure, they look at that and go, well, why can't we do that same thing again?
Absolutely. All right. Next week, we'll talk a little more about the draft and things will be in a lot more focus. So we'll speak to you next week. Jay, have a good one.
Sounds good, buddy. You too.
You got Jay Retcher here each and every week with the Capco NFL Report. Keep it tuned right here. BT Talks Baseball up next.